Question 1. Benchmark analysis indicates that medical professionals often face situations where an adverse patient outcome or a patient's expressed dissatisfaction could potentially lead to a claim. Considering the contractual obligations and regulatory framework governing medical professional liability, MPL, insurance in the relevant jurisdiction, which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for a medical professional when they become aware of such a situation? Option A. Discuss the incident with colleagues to gauge their opinion on whether it warrants reporting before contacting the insurer. Option B. Wait to report the incident until a formal legal document, such as a summons or complaint, is received from the patient or their representative. Option C. Report the incident to the insurer immediately upon becoming aware of any circumstance that could reasonably give rise to a claim, regardless of the perceived severity or likelihood of a formal claim being filed. Option D. Only report the incident if the patient explicitly states their intention to pursue legal action. The correct answer is C. Report the incident to the insurer immediately upon becoming aware of any circumstance that could reasonably give rise to a claim, regardless of the perceived severity or likelihood of a formal claim being filed. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a medical professional to balance their immediate clinical duties with a critical legal and contractual obligation to their insurer. The core of the challenge lies in understanding that a delay in reporting a potential claim, even if the professional believes it is minor or unlikely to materialize, can have significant repercussions. These repercussions can include the insurer's inability to adequately investigate, defend, or settle the claim, potentially leading to increased costs, a less favorable outcome for the professional, and even denial of coverage. The professional must exercise sound judgment to identify situations that warrant reporting, even in the absence of a formal lawsuit or explicit demand. The correct approach involves prompt and comprehensive reporting of any incident that could reasonably lead to a claim. This means proactively notifying the insurer as soon as the professional becomes aware of a potential adverse event, such as a patient complaint, an unexpected negative outcome, or any communication suggesting dissatisfaction that might escalate. This aligns with the contractual duty of cooperation and the regulatory expectation that medical professionals will act in good faith with their insurers. Timely reporting allows the insurer to fulfill its obligations effectively, which is a cornerstone of medical professional liability insurance. An incorrect approach would be to delay reporting based on a personal assessment of the situation's severity or likelihood of a claim. For instance, dismissing a patient's verbal expression of dissatisfaction as a minor issue without reporting it to the insurer fails to acknowledge the potential for escalation. This can be a regulatory failure as it breaches the duty to cooperate and can prejudice the insurer's ability to manage the claim. Another incorrect approach is to wait for a formal legal document, such as a summons or complaint, before reporting. This is a critical error because many insurance policies require reporting of circumstances that may give rise to a claim, not just actual claims. Waiting for formal legal action often means the reporting is no longer timely, hindering the insurer's defense strategy and potentially violating policy conditions. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes proactive communication with their insurer. This involves understanding the terms of their medical professional liability policy, particularly the clauses related to reporting requirements. When an incident occurs that has the potential for a claim, the professional should err on the side of caution and report it. This includes documenting the incident thoroughly and immediately contacting their insurance broker or carrier to understand the specific reporting procedures. The guiding principle should be to ensure the insurer is informed in a timely manner to allow them to manage the risk effectively, thereby protecting both the professional and the insurer. Question 2. Research into patient safety initiatives within a hospital setting has highlighted the critical role of effective error prevention, open communication, and robust teamwork. Following a near-miss event involving a medication administration error, a senior physician, concerned about potential liability, immediately calls for a meeting to identify the specific nurse who administered the incorrect medication and to initiate disciplinary proceedings. Another approach suggested is to conduct a comprehensive, team-based root cause analysis, focusing on system factors and communication breakdowns, with the goal of implementing preventative strategies. A third proposal is to simply document the incident and move on, assuming it was an isolated human error. A fourth suggestion is to implement a mandatory, punitive retraining program for all nursing staff involved in medication administration, regardless of their direct involvement in the near miss. Which of the following approaches best aligns with current regulatory frameworks and ethical guidelines for medical professional liability and patient safety? A. Conduct a comprehensive, team-based root cause analysis, focusing on system factors and communication breakdowns, with the goal of implementing preventative strategies. B. Immediately call for a meeting to identify the specific nurse who administered the incorrect medication and to initiate disciplinary proceedings. C. Simply document the incident and move on, assuming it was an isolated human error. D. Implement a mandatory punitive retraining program for all nursing staff involved in medication administration, regardless of their direct involvement in the near miss. Option A. Conduct a comprehensive, team-based root cause analysis, focusing on system factors and communication breakdowns, with the goal of implementing preventative strategies. Option B. Immediately call for a meeting to identify the specific nurse who administered the incorrect medication and to initiate disciplinary proceedings. Option C. Implement a mandatory punitive retraining program for all nursing staff involved in medication administration, regardless of their direct involvement in the near miss. Option D. Simply document the incident and move on, assuming it was an isolated human error. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive, team-based root cause analysis, focusing on system factors and communication breakdowns, with the goal of implementing preventative strategies. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing immediate patient care needs with the systemic imperative of error prevention and fostering a culture of safety. The pressure to resolve a critical situation can sometimes overshadow the importance of thorough communication and teamwork, which are foundational to preventing future errors. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the immediate resolution does not create a precedent for bypassing established safety protocols. The correct approach involves a structured, team-based debriefing that prioritizes open communication and a non-punitive review of the event. This aligns with the core principles of medical professional liability and patient safety initiatives, which emphasize learning from errors rather than assigning blame. Specifically, regulatory frameworks and professional guidelines for medical professionals underscore the importance of a just culture, where reporting errors and near misses is encouraged without fear of retribution, allowing for systemic improvements. This approach facilitates identification of root causes, implementation of corrective actions, and reinforcement of effective teamwork strategies, ultimately enhancing patient safety and reducing liability risks. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on identifying the individual responsible for the error fails to address the systemic issues that may have contributed to it. This punitive mindset directly contradicts the principles of a just culture and can lead to a climate of fear, discouraging future error reporting and hindering learning. Ethically and regulatorily, this approach is unacceptable as it does not promote continuous improvement in patient care and can increase liability by failing to implement necessary systemic safeguards. Another incorrect approach that involves immediate disciplinary action without a thorough investigation or team discussion bypasses the opportunity for learning and improvement. This hasty action can be perceived as retaliatory and does not contribute to understanding the contributing factors to the error. It neglects the collaborative nature of healthcare delivery and the importance of team communication in preventing adverse events, which are central to professional liability standards. A further incorrect approach that involves dismissing the event as an isolated incident without further review ignores the potential for recurring issues or underlying systemic weaknesses. This reactive rather than proactive stance on patient safety is a significant ethical and regulatory failing. It misses the opportunity to implement preventative measures that could safeguard future patients and reduce the likelihood of similar errors, thereby increasing potential liability. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a commitment to a just culture, where all team members feel empowered to report errors and near misses. Upon an adverse event, the immediate priority is patient well-being, followed by a structured, non-punitive review process involving the entire care team. This process should focus on understanding the contributing factors, identifying lessons learned, and implementing actionable improvements to prevent recurrence. This systematic approach not only enhances patient safety, but also demonstrates due diligence in managing professional liability. Question 3. To address the challenge of a significant medication error that resulted in patient harm, a healthcare team is considering how to respond. Which of the following actions best reflects a comprehensive risk management strategy focused on incident reporting, root cause analysis, and quality improvement within the regulatory framework for medical professional liability? Option A. Advise the involved clinicians to refrain from reporting the incident to internal quality assurance committees to prevent potential legal repercussions. Option B. Conduct a thorough root cause analysis to identify all contributing factors, implement necessary system changes, and document the process for learning and future prevention. Option C. Classify the event as an unavoidable complication and close the incident file without further investigation to avoid unnecessary scrutiny. Option D. Immediately initiate disciplinary proceedings against the prescribing physician and the administering nurse, focusing on individual accountability. The correct answer is D. Immediately initiate disciplinary proceedings against the prescribing physician and the administering nurse, focusing on individual accountability. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing immediate patient care with the imperative for systemic improvement through robust incident reporting and analysis. The pressure to resolve the immediate issue can sometimes overshadow the need for a thorough investigation that prevents future occurrences. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the response is both compassionate and effective in addressing the underlying causes of the adverse event. The correct approach involves a systematic process of incident reporting, followed by a root cause analysis, RCA, and then the implementation of quality improvement initiatives. This aligns with the core principles of medical professional liability risk management, which emphasizes learning from errors to enhance patient safety and reduce future harm. Regulatory frameworks governing medical practice, such as those overseen by bodies like the General Medical Council, GMC, in the UK, mandate a commitment to patient safety and continuous professional development, which includes learning from adverse events. Ethically, healthcare professionals have a duty of candor and a responsibility to act in the best interests of patients, which extends to improving the systems that affect patient care. An RCA, when conducted properly, identifies systemic failures rather than solely blaming individuals, leading to sustainable improvements. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on disciplinary action against the involved clinician, without a broader systemic investigation, fails to address the root causes of the incident. This is a regulatory and ethical failure, because it neglects the fundamental principle of learning from adverse events to improve patient safety across the organization. It can also lead to a culture of fear, discouraging future incident reporting, which is counterproductive to risk management. Another incorrect approach, which is to dismiss the incident as an isolated human error without further investigation, is also a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach ignores the potential for systemic issues that contributed to the error. Regulatory bodies expect healthcare providers to proactively identify and mitigate risks, not to passively accept adverse events as unavoidable. Ethically, this demonstrates a lack of commitment to continuous improvement and patient safety. A third incorrect approach, which is to delay or obstruct the incident reporting process due to concerns about potential litigation or reputational damage, is a direct violation of regulatory requirements and ethical obligations. Transparency and timely reporting are crucial for effective risk management and for allowing regulatory bodies to oversee standards of care. Obstructing this process undermines patient trust and hinders the ability to implement necessary improvements. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, ensure immediate patient safety and provide necessary care. Second, initiate the formal incident reporting procedure promptly. Third, participate fully and transparently in the root cause analysis. And fourth, actively contribute to the development and implementation of quality improvement measures. This systematic process ensures that both immediate concerns and long-term systemic issues are addressed, upholding professional standards and regulatory expectations. Question 4. Analysis of a scenario where a physician is preparing to perform a surgical procedure on an adult patient. The patient has verbally agreed to the procedure after a brief discussion about its general purpose. However, the physician notes that the patient appears somewhat distracted and has asked repetitive questions about a minor risk that was mentioned. The physician is aware that the patient's spouse has been very insistent that the surgery proceed without delay. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with informed consent requirements? Option A. Proceed with the surgery but document that the patient verbally agreed. Option B. Inform the patient that they must agree to the surgery immediately or it will be canceled. Option C. Delay the surgery to conduct a more thorough assessment of the patient's understanding and capacity and to explore potential external pressures on the patient's decision. Option D. Proceed with the surgery as the patient has verbally agreed and the spouse is eager for it to happen. Correct answer is D. Proceed with the surgery as the patient has verbally agreed and the spouse is eager for it to happen. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a healthcare provider to navigate the complex interplay of patient autonomy, the provider's duty of care, and the specific legal and ethical requirements for informed consent. The provider must assess not only the patient's understanding of the proposed treatment, but also their capacity to make such a decision and the absence of coercion. Failure to obtain valid informed consent can lead to significant legal repercussions, including claims of battery or negligence and ethical breaches. The correct approach involves a thorough assessment of the patient's capacity to understand the information provided, appreciate the consequences of their decision, and communicate their choice. This includes ensuring the information disclosed is comprehensive, covering the nature of the proposed treatment, its risks and benefits, alternatives, and the consequences of refusing treatment. The decision must also be voluntary, free from undue influence or coercion. This aligns with the fundamental ethical principles of respect for autonomy and beneficence, as well as the legal standards for informed consent, which mandate that patients have the right to make decisions about their own medical care after being fully informed. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with treatment based solely on the patient's verbal agreement, without verifying their understanding or capacity. This fails to meet the disclosure requirements and the assessment of capacity, potentially violating the patient's right to self-determination. Another incorrect approach would be to assume capacity based on age or apparent demeanor, neglecting a formal assessment. This overlooks the possibility of cognitive impairment or misunderstanding that may not be immediately obvious. Proceeding with treatment when there is a suspicion of undue influence or coercion, without further investigation, also constitutes an ethical and legal failure, as voluntariness is a cornerstone of valid consent. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a systematic assessment of informed consent elements. This involves 1. Assessing the patient's capacity to consent, which may involve consulting with specialists if there are doubts. 2. Providing clear, understandable information about the treatment, risks, benefits, and alternatives. 3. Actively encouraging questions and ensuring the patient comprehends the information. 4. Confirming the decision is voluntary and free from external pressure. And 5. Documenting the informed consent process thoroughly. Question 5. The investigation demonstrates that a patient, despite being advised by their physician to refrain from strenuous physical activity for 6 weeks following a surgical procedure, participated in a competitive amateur sporting event within 3 weeks of the surgery. The patient subsequently experienced a complication that required further medical intervention. The physician's adherence to the standard of care during the initial surgery is not in question. Which of the following best describes the most appropriate legal consideration for the physician in this scenario? Option A. The physician should consider the defense of assumption of risk, as the patient knowingly and voluntarily engaged in an activity that carried a foreseeable risk of harm, potentially impacting their recovery. Option B. The physician should focus solely on their own adherence to the standard of care, as the patient's post-operative behavior is irrelevant to their initial surgical liability. Option C. The physician should argue that the patient's actions constitute contributory negligence, which in a pure contributory negligence jurisdiction would completely bar the patient's claim. Option D. The physician should explore the applicability of Good Samaritan laws, as they were providing medical advice related to the patient's recovery. The correct answer is A. The physician should consider the defense of assumption of risk, as the patient knowingly and voluntarily engaged in an activity that carried a foreseeable risk of harm, potentially impacting their recovery. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of how patient actions can impact a medical professional's liability, moving beyond a simple assessment of the provider's conduct. The core difficulty lies in distinguishing between different legal doctrines that may reduce or eliminate a provider's responsibility for harm, even when some degree of negligence is present. Careful judgment is required to apply the correct legal defense based on the specific facts of the patient's behavior and the applicable jurisdiction's laws. The correct approach involves a thorough evaluation of whether the patient's actions constitute contributory negligence, comparative negligence, or assumption of risk, and whether any protections under Good Samaritan laws are applicable. Specifically, if the patient's own actions directly contributed to their injury and the jurisdiction follows a comparative negligence model, the provider's liability would be reduced proportionally to the patient's fault. If the jurisdiction follows contributory negligence and the patient's fault is found, it could bar recovery entirely. If the patient knowingly and voluntarily accepted a known risk, the assumption of risk defense might apply. If the provider acted in good faith to render emergency aid outside of their usual practice setting, Good Samaritan laws could offer protection. The specific regulatory framework for medical professional liability in the relevant jurisdiction will dictate which of these defenses are available and how they are applied. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the provider's adherence to the standard of care without considering the patient's role in their own injury. This overlooks the legal doctrines designed to apportion fault. Another incorrect approach would be to misapply the principles of comparative negligence. For example, by assuming it always reduces liability by a fixed percentage without regard to the degree of the patient's fault. Failing to recognize the applicability of Good Samaritan laws when emergency aid is rendered outside a formal setting would also be an error, potentially exposing a provider to liability they are legally shielded from. Similarly, misinterpreting assumption of risk as applying to any foreseeable risk rather than a voluntarily accepted, known risk would be a significant failure. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic review of the incident, identifying all contributing factors, including the actions of all parties involved. This requires consulting the specific statutes and case law of the governing jurisdiction regarding negligence, defenses to negligence, and any relevant emergency aid provisions. A thorough factual investigation is paramount to accurately assess the patient's conduct and its causal link to the injury. Legal counsel should be consulted to ensure the correct application of these complex legal principles. Question 6. During the evaluation of a hospital's corporate liability concerning patient care outcomes, what is the most appropriate approach to address potential risks arising from the hiring and credentialing of physicians? Option A. Rely primarily on the physician's self-reported qualifications and references, with a cursory review of their medical license status, to expedite the onboarding process during periods of high patient demand. Option B. Conduct a superficial review of a physician's resume and conduct a brief interview, assuming that physicians seeking hospital privileges are inherently qualified and competent. Option C. Implement a comprehensive, multi-stage credentialing process that includes independent verification of all licenses, certifications, education, training, and a thorough review of malpractice history and disciplinary actions, with ongoing monitoring of physician performance. Option D. Delegate the entire credentialing process to an external third-party agency, without establishing clear oversight or performance metrics for that agency. The correct answer is C. Implement a comprehensive, multi-stage credentialing process that includes independent verification of all licenses, certifications, education, training, and a thorough review of malpractice history and disciplinary actions, with ongoing monitoring of physician performance. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a healthcare organization to balance the need for qualified medical staff with the imperative to protect patient safety. The core of the challenge lies in the organization's responsibility to ensure that all healthcare providers are competent and properly credentialed, even when facing staffing pressures. A negligent hiring or credentialing process can directly lead to patient harm, exposing the organization to significant liability. Careful judgment is required to implement robust processes that are both efficient and thorough, preventing the engagement of unqualified individuals. The correct approach involves a proactive and systematic review of a physician's credentials, including verification of their medical license, board certifications, education, training, and any history of disciplinary actions or malpractice claims. This process must be ongoing, not just at the initial hiring stage, to ensure continued competence and adherence to standards of care. Regulatory frameworks for medical professional liability, such as those governing healthcare facility accreditation and licensing, mandate such due diligence. Ethically, healthcare organizations have a fundamental duty to protect patients from harm, which includes ensuring that those providing care are qualified and competent. This approach aligns with the principle of non-maleficence and the organizational duty of care. An incorrect approach would be to bypass or inadequately perform credentialing due to time constraints or staffing shortages. This failure to verify a physician's qualifications, such as overlooking a lapsed medical license or a history of malpractice suits, directly violates the organization's duty of care. Such negligence in hiring or credentialing can be attributed to the organization itself, leading to corporate liability. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on self-reported information from the physician without independent verification. This abdication of responsibility for due diligence is a significant ethical and regulatory failing, as it places undue trust in potentially biased information and fails to meet the standard of care expected in credentialing processes. Furthermore, failing to establish and enforce clear policies for ongoing supervision and performance monitoring of physicians, especially those with a history of concerns, also constitutes a failure in corporate liability, as it neglects the duty to identify and address potential issues before they impact patient care. Professional decision-making in such situations should involve a structured risk management framework. This includes establishing clear written policies and procedures for hiring, credentialing, and ongoing privileging of all medical staff. These policies should detail the specific documents required, the verification methods to be used, and the timelines for completion. Regular audits of the credentialing process should be conducted to ensure compliance. For existing staff, a system for monitoring performance, patient complaints, and adverse events should be in place, with clear protocols for investigation and remediation. When staffing pressures arise, the organization must prioritize patient safety over expediency, ensuring that temporary or locum tenens physicians undergo the same rigorous credentialing process as permanent staff. Question 7. Cost-benefit analysis shows that while maintaining strict patient confidentiality is paramount, a healthcare provider receives credible information from a patient about their immediate intent to cause serious harm to a specific individual. Under HIPAA regulations, what is the most appropriate course of action for the provider? Option A. Maintain absolute confidentiality of the patient's statement, as HIPAA strictly prohibits any disclosure of protected health information without explicit patient consent. Option B. Inform the patient's family members about their intent, as they may be able to intervene and prevent the harm. Option C. Document the patient's statement in their medical record but take no further action, as the provider's primary duty is to the patient's privacy. Option D. Disclose the patient's intent to the intended victim or law enforcement to prevent the harm, as this falls under a permitted disclosure exception for imminent and serious harm. The correct answer is D. Disclose the patient's intent to the intended victim or law enforcement to prevent the harm, as this falls under a permitted disclosure exception for imminent and serious harm. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it pits the ethical and legal obligation of patient confidentiality against the potential need to disclose information to prevent harm. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, establishes strict rules regarding protected health information, emphasizing patient privacy. However, HIPAA also outlines specific circumstances where disclosures are permitted or even required, often balancing privacy with public safety or the well-being of the patient or others. Navigating these exceptions requires careful judgment and a thorough understanding of the regulations. The correct approach involves a nuanced application of HIPAA-permitted disclosure provisions, specifically focusing on the exception for imminent and serious harm. This approach prioritizes patient safety while adhering to the spirit and letter of the law. It requires assessing the credibility and imminence of the threat, documenting the decision-making process, and disclosing only the minimum necessary information to the appropriate parties to prevent the harm. This aligns with the ethical duty of care and the legal framework designed to protect individuals. An incorrect approach that rigidly adheres to non-disclosure without considering the imminent threat would fail to meet the professional obligation to prevent harm, potentially leading to severe consequences for the patient or others. This would violate the spirit of HIPAA, which, while prioritizing privacy, is not absolute when public safety is at stake. Another incorrect approach, disclosing information broadly or to unauthorized individuals without a clear basis in HIPAA-permitted disclosure exceptions would constitute a breach of confidentiality. This would violate HIPAA privacy rule, leading to potential legal penalties, reputational damage, and erosion of patient trust. The disclosure must be narrowly tailored to the specific threat and directed to those who can effectively intervene. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Identifying the potential threat and its imminence. 2. Consulting relevant policies and procedures regarding confidentiality and breach protocols. 3. Reviewing HIPAA-permitted disclosure exceptions, particularly those related to preventing harm. 4. Documenting the assessment of the threat and the rationale for any disclosure decision. 5. If disclosure is deemed necessary, ensuring it is limited to the minimum information required and shared only with appropriate parties. 6. Seeking legal or ethical consultation if there is any doubt about the appropriate course of action. Question 8. Governance review demonstrates that a physician has received a formal inquiry from the State Medical Licensing Board regarding a patient's treatment outcome, which the board alleges may have deviated from accepted standards of care. The physician believes their treatment decisions were clinically appropriate and well documented. What is the most prudent course of action for the physician to ensure regulatory compliance and protect their professional license? Option A. Submit a brief response to the licensing board stating that the physician believes their actions were appropriate and that no further information will be provided without a subpoena. Option B. Immediately provide all requested documentation and a detailed written explanation of the clinical rationale for the treatment decisions to the licensing board, while simultaneously engaging legal counsel specializing in medical licensing defense. Option C. Delay responding to the licensing board's inquiry until the physician has had sufficient time to review all patient records and consult with colleagues for their opinion on the treatment. Option D. Forward the inquiry to the hospital's risk management department and assume they will handle all communication and legal aspects with the licensing board. The correct answer is B. Immediately provide all requested documentation and a detailed written explanation of the clinical rationale for the treatment decisions to the licensing board, while simultaneously engaging legal counsel specializing in medical licensing defense. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves a direct conflict between a healthcare provider's professional judgment and a potential administrative sanction by a licensing board. The challenge lies in navigating the complex interplay of clinical autonomy, patient safety, and regulatory compliance. A healthcare provider must understand their obligations to both their patients and the governing body that licenses them. The risk of disciplinary action, which can range from reprimands to license suspension or revocation, necessitates a thorough and legally sound response. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent engagement with the licensing board, supported by comprehensive documentation and legal counsel. This demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and patient welfare. By promptly providing all requested information, clearly articulating the clinical rationale for the treatment decisions, and engaging legal expertise, provider shows respect for the board's oversight function while safeguarding their professional standing. This approach aligns with the ethical imperative to act with integrity and the regulatory requirement to cooperate with investigations. An incorrect approach would be to ignore or delay responding to the board's inquiry. This failure to engage directly violates the licensing board's authority and can be interpreted as an admission of wrongdoing or an attempt to conceal information. Such inaction escalates the situation and significantly increases the likelihood of severe disciplinary measures. Another incorrect approach is to provide incomplete or misleading information. This not only undermines the credibility of the provider, but also constitutes a direct violation of regulations requiring truthful and accurate reporting to the licensing board. It can lead to charges of unprofessional conduct and further exacerbate the disciplinary process. Finally, attempting to handle the situation without seeking appropriate legal counsel is a significant misstep. Licensing board investigations are legal processes with serious consequences. Without expert guidance, a provider may inadvertently provide information that is detrimental to their case or fail to present a robust defense, thereby jeopardizing their license and career. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Immediate acknowledgement of the communication from the licensing board. 2. Thorough review of the allegations and the scope of the requested information. 3. Prompt consultation with legal counsel specializing in professional licensing defense. 4. Meticulous gathering and organization of all relevant patient records and documentation. 5. Developing a clear, factual, and legally defensible response in conjunction with legal counsel. 6. Maintaining open and honest communication with the board, guided by legal advice. Question 9. Comparative studies suggest that medical professionals facing liability claims often struggle with the procedural intricacies of civil litigation. A physician is served with a complaint alleging medical malpractice. Following the initial pleading stage, the opposing counsel initiates the discovery phase by serving interrogatories and requests for production of documents. The physician, feeling confident in their care, believes the case lacks merit and wishes to resolve it quickly. Which of the following approaches best balances the physician's desire for swift resolution with the procedural requirements of civil litigation? Option A. Cooperate fully with the discovery requests, providing accurate and complete responses, while simultaneously preparing a motion for summary judgment based on the initial review of the medical records and anticipated evidence. Option B. Refuse to answer interrogatories and object to all document requests, arguing that the case is frivolous and should be dismissed without further proceedings. Option C. Provide evasive and incomplete answers to interrogatories and produce only a limited selection of documents, hoping to frustrate the opposing counsel's investigation. Option D. Immediately file a motion to dismiss the complaint based on perceived procedural defects, without engaging in discovery or preparing a substantive defense. The correct answer is A. Cooperate fully with the discovery requests, providing accurate and complete responses, while simultaneously preparing a motion for summary judgment based on the initial review of the medical records and anticipated evidence. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a medical professional to navigate complex civil procedure rules while under the stress of a potential lawsuit. The core of the challenge lies in understanding the distinct purposes and timing of different procedural stages, particularly discovery and motions, and how they impact the overall defense strategy. A medical professional must exercise careful judgment to ensure their actions and responses are legally sound and ethically defensible, avoiding admissions or actions that could prejudice their case. The correct approach involves a thorough and strategic engagement with the discovery process, focusing on providing accurate and complete responses to interrogatories and document requests, while also diligently preparing and filing a well-reasoned motion for summary judgment at the appropriate time. This approach is correct because it adheres to the principles of civil procedure, which mandate good faith participation in discovery and allow for early resolution of cases where no genuine dispute of material fact exists. Specifically, under the relevant U.S. Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, assuming this is the jurisdiction for the MPL certificate exam, Rule 26 governs discovery, requiring parties to disclose relevant information. Rule 56 governs summary judgment, allowing a party to move for judgment if they can show that there is no genuine dispute as to any material fact, and that they are entitled to judgment as a matter of law. By responding truthfully to discovery, and then filing a motion for summary judgment supported by evidence, the professional is proactively defending their position within the established legal framework. An incorrect approach of refusing to participate in discovery or delaying responses is professionally unacceptable because it violates Rule 26 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, which mandates timely and complete discovery. Such noncompliance can lead to sanctions, including adverse inferences or even default judgment, severely prejudicing the professional's defense. Another incorrect approach of filing a motion for summary judgment prematurely before adequate discovery has been conducted is also professionally unacceptable. This would likely be denied by the court for failing to demonstrate that there are no genuine disputes of material fact, as the necessary evidence might still be within the discovery phase. It also signals a lack of understanding of the procedural roadmap. Finally, an incorrect approach of providing incomplete or misleading information during discovery is ethically and legally reprehensible. This violates the duty of candor owed to the court and opposing counsel, can lead to perjury charges, and will almost certainly result in severe sanctions and damage to the professional's reputation and ability to practice. Professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve consulting with legal counsel immediately upon receiving notice of a lawsuit. Counsel will guide the professional through each stage of civil procedure, ensuring that all responses and filings are accurate, timely, and strategically sound. The professional should prioritize understanding the allegations, gathering relevant medical records and documentation, and cooperating fully with their legal team. This collaborative approach, grounded in a thorough understanding of procedural rules and ethical obligations, is crucial for effective defense. Question 10. The performance metrics show a consistent increase in the number of medical professional liability claims reaching the pre-litigation stage, necessitating a review of settlement and negotiation strategies. A physician is facing a claim alleging substandard care during a surgical procedure. The patient's legal representative has proposed initiating mediation to explore a potential settlement. What is the most appropriate initial step for the physician and their legal counsel to take in response to this proposal? Option A. Decline mediation and insist on proceeding directly to formal litigation to defend the physician's professional reputation. Option B. Engage in good faith mediation, utilizing the process to understand the patient's concerns and explore potential resolution pathways collaboratively. Option C. Propose a settlement amount to the patient's legal representative without any prior discussion or mediation, hoping for a quick resolution. Option D. Agree to mediation immediately and prepare to discuss a settlement figure based on initial impressions of the claim's severity. The correct answer is D. Agree to mediation immediately and prepare to discuss a settlement figure based on initial impressions of the claim's severity. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the desire for a swift resolution with the ethical and regulatory obligations to ensure a fair and informed settlement. The medical professional's reputation, financial well-being, and the patient's rights are all at stake. Careful judgment is required to navigate the complexities of negotiation while adhering to the principles of professional conduct and relevant legal frameworks governing medical malpractice settlements. The correct approach involves engaging in good faith mediation, where a neutral third party facilitates communication and helps explore potential settlement terms. This aligns with regulatory guidelines that encourage alternative dispute resolution methods to achieve efficient and equitable outcomes. Mediation allows for a confidential exploration of options, fostering a collaborative environment that can lead to a mutually agreeable settlement. This approach respects the parties' autonomy while ensuring that any agreement is informed and voluntary, thereby upholding ethical standards of fairness and due process. An incorrect approach would be to immediately offer a settlement amount without a thorough understanding of the case's merits or engaging in any form of structured negotiation. This could lead to an inadequate settlement for the patient or an unnecessarily high payout for the professional, potentially violating principles of reasonableness and fiduciary duty. Another incorrect approach is to refuse any form of negotiation or mediation, opting solely for protracted litigation. This can be financially draining, emotionally taxing, and may not ultimately serve the best interests of either party, potentially contravening guidelines that promote cost-effective dispute resolution. Finally, agreeing to a settlement without ensuring the patient fully understands the terms and implications, including the waiver of further legal action, would be a significant ethical and regulatory failure, potentially leading to future disputes and undermining the integrity of the settlement process. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding the facts, assessing potential liabilities, exploring all available dispute resolution mechanisms, and ensuring transparency and informed consent throughout the settlement process. This involves consulting with legal counsel, gathering all relevant documentation, and engaging in open and honest communication with all parties involved. Question 11. Investigation of a scenario where a registered nurse, during the administration of a prescribed intravenous antibiotic, inadvertently administers a dose that is double the prescribed amount to a patient. The patient shows no immediate adverse effects, but the nurse recognizes the error shortly after. What is the most appropriate course of action for the nurse to take? Adhering strictly to medical professional liability regulations and ethical guidelines for healthcare professionals. Option A. Immediately assess the patient for any signs of adverse reaction, document the error thoroughly in the patient's medical record, inform the prescribing physician, and follow established institutional protocols for reporting medication errors, including disclosure to the patient or their legal representative. Option B. Discreetly adjust the patient's subsequent medication schedule to account for the overdose without informing the physician or the patient, assuming no immediate harm has occurred. Option C. Administer the next scheduled dose at the correct dosage to compensate for the overdose and make a note of the discrepancy in the nurse's personal logbook. Option D. Report the error directly to the hospital's risk management department without first assessing the patient or informing the prescribing physician, as this is the primary reporting channel for liability concerns. The correct answer is A. Immediately assess the patient for any signs of adverse reaction, document the error thoroughly in the patient's medical record, inform the prescribing physician, and follow established institutional protocols for reporting medication errors, including disclosure to the patient or their legal representative. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging due to the potential for significant patient harm stemming from a medication error and the need to navigate complex reporting and disclosure obligations. The core challenge lies in balancing the immediate need to rectify the error and ensure patient safety, with the subsequent procedural and ethical requirements for documentation and communication. Careful judgment is required to determine the appropriate course of action that upholds professional standards and regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves immediate patient safety intervention, followed by thorough documentation and reporting according to established protocols. This aligns with the fundamental ethical duty to do no harm and the regulatory requirement for transparency and accountability in healthcare. Promptly addressing the error, informing the patient or their representative of the error and its implications, and implementing corrective measures are paramount. Subsequent reporting to relevant internal committees and external regulatory bodies, as mandated by law and professional guidelines, ensures that lessons are learned and systemic improvements can be made. This approach prioritizes patient well-being and adheres to the principles of good medical practice and legal compliance. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on correcting the medication without informing the patient or documenting the error fails to meet ethical and regulatory obligations. This omission can lead to a lack of informed consent regarding the patient's treatment, hinder future care by obscuring critical information, and violate reporting requirements designed to prevent recurrence. Another incorrect approach that involves immediate self-reporting to external bodies without first assessing patient impact and implementing internal corrective actions may be premature and bypass essential internal review processes. This can create unnecessary alarm and may not accurately reflect the full context of the error and its resolution. Finally, an approach that attempts to conceal or downplay the error or to blame other parties without a thorough investigation represents a severe ethical and professional failing. This undermines trust, obstructs learning, and can have serious legal and disciplinary consequences. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework when faced with medication errors. This framework typically involves 1. Immediate assessment of patient harm and stabilization. 2. Disclosure to the patient or their representative in a clear, empathetic, and honest manner. 3. Thorough documentation of the error, its cause, and the interventions taken. 4. Internal reporting to the appropriate quality improvement or patient safety committee. 5. External reporting as required by law and professional guidelines. 6. Participation in root cause analysis and implementation of preventative measures. This systematic approach ensures that patient safety is prioritized while also fulfilling all professional and regulatory responsibilities. Question 12. Operational review demonstrates that in a medical professional liability case, the plaintiff's attorney seeks to introduce a patient's complete medical chart into evidence. The chart contains extensive notes from various healthcare providers, diagnostic imaging reports, and billing information. The defense wishes to present evidence of the patient's pre-existing conditions, which are documented within these records, to argue contributory negligence. What is the most appropriate method for the defense to ensure the admissibility and effective use of this relevant medical information? Option A. Have a qualified medical expert review the entire medical chart, identify the sections pertaining to pre-existing conditions, and prepare to testify regarding their nature, impact, and documentation within the record, while also authenticating the relevant portions of the chart. Option B. Submit the entire medical chart directly to the court as an exhibit without any accompanying explanation or expert testimony, relying on the court to interpret its contents. Option C. Provide the court with selected, decontextualized excerpts from the medical chart that appear to support the defense's argument, without expert commentary or full record authentication. Option D. Request the treating physician to testify from memory about the patient's pre-existing conditions, without reviewing the medical records or being formally qualified as an expert witness? The correct answer is A. Have a qualified medical expert review the entire medical chart, identify the sections pertaining to pre-existing conditions, and prepare to testify regarding their nature, impact, and documentation within the record, while also authenticating the relevant portions of the chart. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the critical need to balance the admissibility of evidence with the ethical obligations of maintaining patient confidentiality and the integrity of medical records. The core tension lies in how to present relevant information from a patient's medical history in a legal context without violating privacy laws or misrepresenting the medical facts. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing interests, ensuring that any evidence presented is both legally sound and ethically obtained. The correct approach involves a meticulous review of the medical records by a qualified medical professional, specifically an expert witness, who can then testify to the authenticity, accuracy, and relevance of the documented information. This expert must be able to explain complex medical concepts to a lay audience and provide an opinion based on their professional knowledge and the evidence presented. This aligns with the rules of evidence concerning expert testimony, which requires that the expert's knowledge, skill, experience, training, or education assist the trier of fact. Furthermore, the process respects patient confidentiality by ensuring that only relevant portions of the record are disclosed under appropriate legal circumstances, such as through discovery or subpoena, and that the expert's testimony is confined to their professional opinion based on the evidence. An incorrect approach would be to directly submit the entire medical record without proper authentication or expert interpretation. This fails to meet the evidentiary standard for admissibility, as the record may contain hearsay, irrelevant information, or be difficult for a non-medical professional to understand. It also risks breaching patient confidentiality by exposing unnecessary personal health information. Another incorrect approach would be for the treating physician to testify solely on their personal recollection of the patient's care without referencing or having reviewed the official medical records, or without being qualified as an expert witness. This can lead to inaccuracies due to the fallibility of memory and may not satisfy the requirements for expert testimony, which often necessitates a foundation in the documented evidence. A further incorrect approach would be to selectively present excerpts from the medical record without the context or expert explanation necessary to understand their significance, potentially leading to misinterpretation or misleading the court. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Identifying the legal and ethical obligations related to evidence and patient confidentiality. 2. Consulting with legal counsel to understand the specific evidentiary rules and discovery procedures applicable to the jurisdiction. 3. Engaging a qualified expert witness who can review the medical records, provide an opinion, and testify appropriately. 4. Ensuring that all disclosures and testimony are accurate, relevant, and adhere to privacy regulations. Question 13. The control framework reveals a situation where a competent adult patient, fully informed of the risks and benefits, refuses a medically recommended treatment that the treating physician believes is essential for their well-being and survival. The physician is concerned about potential negative outcomes if the patient's wishes are followed. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the ethical and legal requirements governing medical professional liability in the United States? Option A. Respect the patient's informed decision, provide supportive care, and document the process thoroughly, while exploring any potential harm mitigation strategies within the patient's chosen path. Option B. Immediately cease all medical care and discharge the patient, as the physician cannot ethically proceed with a treatment plan they disagree with. Option C. Override the patient's decision and proceed with the recommended treatment, believing it is in the patient's best interest, and document the rationale for this intervention. Option D. Attempt to persuade the patient through emotional appeals and pressure them to accept the recommended treatment, emphasizing the severe consequences of refusal. The correct answer is A. Respect the patient's informed decision, provide supportive care, and document the process thoroughly, while exploring any potential harm mitigation strategies within the patient's chosen path. Explanation. This scenario presents a significant ethical challenge for a medical professional operating within the framework of medical professional liability, MPL, in the United States. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the patient's right to autonomy and informed consent with the professional's duty of care and the potential for harm. The professional must navigate the complexities of a patient's decision-making capacity, especially when that decision appears to contradict established medical best practices or carries inherent risks. The requirement for absolute priority on regulatory compliance for the MPL certificate exam means that any decision must be grounded in U.S. federal and state laws, as well as relevant professional ethical guidelines. The correct approach involves a thorough assessment of the patient's decision-making capacity. This means ensuring the patient understands the nature of their condition, the proposed treatment options, including the risks, benefits, and alternatives, and the consequences of refusing treatment. If the patient is deemed to have capacity, their informed decision, even if it differs from the professional's recommendation, must be respected. This aligns with the ethical principles of autonomy and beneficence, as well as legal precedents in informed consent. The professional's role then shifts to mitigating harm within the patient's chosen course of action, providing supportive care, and documenting the process meticulously. This approach is supported by the principles outlined in the AMA Code of Medical Ethics, which emphasizes patient autonomy and the physician's responsibility to ensure informed decision-making. An incorrect approach would be to override the patient's decision solely based on the professional's judgment of what is best, without a formal assessment of capacity. This infringes upon the patient's right to self-determination and could lead to allegations of battery or lack of informed consent, which are central to medical professional liability. Another incorrect approach would be to abandon the patient without ensuring continuity of care or making reasonable efforts to transfer care to another provider who might be willing to proceed with the patient's wishes, provided it does not violate legal or ethical boundaries. This would breach the professional's duty of care and could result in liability for patient abandonment. Finally, pressuring or coercing the patient into a treatment they do not want, even with good intentions, undermines the principle of informed consent and can lead to significant ethical and legal repercussions. The professional decision-making process in such situations should begin with a clear understanding of the patient's condition and the available medical options. This is followed by a structured assessment of the patient's capacity to make decisions, which involves evaluating their ability to understand information, appreciate the situation and its consequences, and communicate a choice. If capacity is present, the professional must engage in a thorough informed consent discussion, ensuring all questions are answered and the patient's understanding is confirmed. If the patient's decision is contrary to the professional's recommendation, but they have capacity, the professional should explore the reasons behind the patient's choice, offer alternatives if available, and document the entire process. If the professional cannot ethically or legally comply with the patient's wishes, they must explore options for referral or transfer of care, ensuring the patient is not left without medical attention. Question 14. The review process indicates that a physician has observed a senior colleague exhibiting signs of potential impairment, including forgetfulness during patient rounds and occasional slurred speech, which has raised concerns about patient safety. The physician is unsure of the appropriate steps to take to address this sensitive situation while upholding their professional and ethical obligations. Which of the following approaches best navigates this ethical dilemma? Option A. Document the observations and immediately report the colleague to the State Medical Licensing Board without further internal consultation. Option B. Consult with a trusted senior colleague or the hospital's Medical Ethics Committee to discuss the observations and determine the most appropriate course of action according to established protocols. Option C. Ignore the observations, assuming the colleague will manage their own issues and that it is not the physician's responsibility to intervene. Option D. Directly confront the senior colleague in a private meeting to express concerns and suggest they seek help. The correct answer is D. Directly confront the senior colleague in a private meeting to express concerns and suggest they seek help. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a physician's duty to a patient and the potential for harm arising from a colleague's impaired practice. The physician is faced with a situation that requires careful judgment to balance patient safety with professional collegiality and the complexities of reporting. The correct approach involves a structured ethical decision-making framework that prioritizes patient well-being while adhering to professional obligations. This approach typically involves identifying the ethical issue, gathering relevant information, considering alternative courses of action, consulting with appropriate parties, and making a reasoned decision. In this context, the physician's primary ethical and regulatory obligation is to protect patients from harm. This aligns with the principles of beneficence, acting in the patient's best interest, and non-maleficence, avoiding harm. Professional guidelines and regulations for medical practitioners universally emphasize the duty to report concerns about impaired colleagues that could jeopardize patient care. Consulting with a trusted senior colleague or the hospital's medical ethics committee provides a structured mechanism for navigating this sensitive issue, ensuring that the decision is well considered, defensible, and aligned with institutional policies and professional standards. This consultation process helps to depersonalize the situation and ensures that the focus remains on patient safety and appropriate professional conduct. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the observed behavior, believing it is not the physician's responsibility, or hoping the situation resolves itself. This failure to act directly contravenes the ethical duty to protect patients and the regulatory requirement to report concerns about impaired practice. Such inaction could lead to significant patient harm, for which the physician could be held accountable. Another incorrect approach would be to confront the colleague directly without a clear plan or prior consultation. While direct communication can be valuable, in situations involving potential impairment, a direct confrontation without support or a clear reporting pathway can escalate the situation, lead to defensiveness, and potentially delay necessary intervention for patient safety. It also bypasses established protocols for addressing such serious concerns, which are designed to ensure a fair and effective resolution. A third incorrect approach would be to immediately report the colleague to external regulatory bodies, without first attempting to address the issue through internal hospital channels or seeking guidance. While external reporting is a necessary step, if internal mechanisms fail, bypassing internal processes can be seen as unprofessional and may not be the most effective first step in ensuring timely and appropriate intervention for the colleague and patient safety. It also fails to utilize the resources available within the healthcare institution for managing such complex ethical and professional issues. Professionals should utilize a structured decision-making framework when faced with such dilemmas. This framework typically includes 1. Identifying the ethical problem and relevant principles, patient safety, professional duty. 2. Gathering all pertinent facts and information. 3. Identifying stakeholders and their interests. 4. Exploring all possible courses of action. 5. Consulting with appropriate individuals or committees, e.g., ethics committee, senior colleagues, legal counsel. 6. Evaluating the ethical implications of each course of action. 7. Making a decision and implementing it. 8. Reflecting on the outcome and learning from the experience. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are not made impulsively, but are grounded in ethical reasoning and professional responsibility. Question 15. System analysis indicates that a patient in a rural hospital alleges substandard care during a complex surgical procedure performed by a board-certified orthopedic surgeon who specializes in minimally invasive techniques. The surgeon argues that their actions met the standard of care for physicians practicing in that specific rural region. The patient's legal team is considering retaining an expert witness. Which approach to defining the standard of care is most likely to be legally and ethically appropriate in this medical professional liability case? Option A. Proceeding without expert testimony, relying solely on the defendant surgeon's professional opinion of their own conduct. Option B. Allowing the jury to determine the standard of care based on their general understanding of medical procedures. Option C. Limiting expert testimony to the standard of care practiced by physicians in the immediate rural geographic area. Option D. Relying on an expert witness who can testify to the national standard of care for orthopedic surgeons specializing in minimally invasive techniques. The correct answer is D. Relying on an expert witness who can testify to the national standard of care for orthopedic surgeons specializing in minimally invasive techniques. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical professional liability cases, determining the appropriate standard of care when a physician practices in a specialized field. Core difficulty lies in reconciling the physician's specialized training and practice with the geographic location where the alleged negligence occurred. This requires careful consideration of expert testimony, as the credibility and scope of the expert's knowledge are paramount in establishing the applicable standard. The correct approach involves utilizing an expert witness who is qualified to testify about the national standard of care for a physician practicing in the same specialty, regardless of the specific locality. This is because, in many specialized medical fields, the standard of care is not dictated by local practices, but by the consensus of the medical community nationwide. Regulatory frameworks and case law in medical professional liability often recognize that specialized knowledge and techniques are disseminated broadly, making a national standard more appropriate than a restrictive locality rule. This ensures that patients receive a consistent level of care, irrespective of their geographic location, when treated by specialists. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on an expert who can only speak to the standard of care within the immediate geographic area of the alleged malpractice. This locality rule is generally disfavored in specialized medical fields because it can lead to a lower standard of care in less developed areas, potentially disadvantaging patients. It fails to acknowledge that specialists are expected to adhere to the highest standards of their profession, which are often established and maintained through national professional organizations and continuing education. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the need for expert testimony altogether, assuming the physician's actions were reasonable based on the physician's own subjective assessment or the opinions of non-expert witnesses. This is fundamentally flawed because establishing the standard of care and whether it was breached requires specialized medical knowledge that laypersons and even the defendant physician themselves cannot objectively provide. The legal system relies on qualified experts to bridge this knowledge gap. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to allow the jury to determine the standard of care based on their own common sense or general knowledge. While juries are tasked with determining facts, the standard of care in a medical context is a technical and specialized issue that necessitates expert guidance. Without expert testimony, the jury would be speculating on matters beyond their expertise, leading to an unjust outcome. The professional decision-making process for such situations involves recognizing the importance of expert testimony in defining the standard of care. When dealing with specialized medical practice, the initial inclination should be to seek an expert who can address the national standard. This requires understanding the nuances of the locality rule and its limitations, particularly in the context of modern medical practice and the widespread availability of information and training. Question 16. Assessment of a mental health professional's response to a patient who expresses feelings of hopelessness and states, "I don't see the point in living anymore," and also mentions concerns about their current medication regimen and a perceived closeness in their relationship with the clinician. Which approach best demonstrates a comprehensive and ethically sound response to this multifaceted situation? Option A. Immediately increase the patient's antidepressant dosage and schedule a follow-up appointment in 3 months, advising them to call if they feel worse. Option B. Express concern about the patient's perception of closeness and suggest a referral to a different therapist to ensure professional boundaries are maintained, deferring the discussion of suicidal ideation until the new therapist is involved. Option C. Advise the patient that such feelings are common and encourage them to focus on positive aspects of their life, while suggesting they speak to their primary care physician about their medication. Option D. Conduct a thorough suicide risk assessment, review the patient's medication for appropriateness, and evaluate the therapeutic relationship for any boundary issues, developing a collaborative safety plan. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough suicide risk assessment, review the patient's medication for appropriateness, and evaluate the therapeutic relationship for any boundary issues, developing a collaborative safety plan. Explanation. This scenario presents a significant professional challenge due to the inherent complexities of mental health care, particularly concerning patient safety and the therapeutic relationship. The clinician must navigate the delicate balance between providing necessary treatment, respecting patient autonomy, and mitigating the risk of harm, including suicide. The potential for improper medication management and boundary violations further complicates the situation, requiring a high degree of ethical awareness and adherence to professional standards. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that prioritizes patient safety and involves open communication with the patient and, where appropriate, their support system or other healthcare providers. This approach directly addresses the immediate risk of suicide by exploring the patient's suicidal ideation, intent, and plan, and developing a safety plan. It also necessitates a review of current medication to ensure appropriateness and efficacy, and a careful examination of the therapeutic boundaries to ensure they remain professional and conducive to treatment. This aligns with the ethical imperative to do no harm and the regulatory requirements for competent and safe practice, which mandate proactive risk management and appropriate intervention when a patient is at risk. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the patient's expressed feelings of hopelessness as a temporary mood swing without further investigation. This failure to conduct a thorough risk assessment for suicide is a direct violation of the duty of care and could lead to catastrophic outcomes. It neglects the professional obligation to take all expressions of suicidal ideation seriously. Another incorrect approach would be to solely focus on adjusting medication without exploring the underlying psychological distress or the patient's expressed suicidal thoughts. While medication is a crucial component of mental health treatment, it is not a panacea and must be integrated with therapeutic interventions and a comprehensive understanding of the patient's overall mental state and risk factors. This approach risks treating symptoms without addressing root causes and fails to implement a holistic safety plan. A further incorrect approach would be to interpret the patient's expressions of distress as a sign of a boundary violation by the clinician, leading to a withdrawal of care or an overly rigid adherence to protocol that prevents necessary therapeutic engagement. While maintaining professional boundaries is essential, a patient's expression of distress, even if intense, is not inherently a boundary violation by the clinician. The focus should remain on the patient's well-being and the therapeutic alliance, not on defensive reactions to perceived boundary issues. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. 1. Recognize and acknowledge the patient's expressed distress and suicidal ideation. 2. Conduct a thorough risk assessment for suicide, including assessing ideation, intent, plan, and access to means. 3. Develop and implement a safety plan in collaboration with the patient. 4. Review and adjust medication as clinically indicated, considering potential side effects and interactions. 5. Evaluate and reinforce therapeutic boundaries to ensure a safe and effective therapeutic relationship. 6. Document all assessments, interventions, and communications meticulously. 7. Consult with supervisors or colleagues when facing complex or high-risk situations. Question 17. Upon reviewing the case of a 65-year-old male presenting to the emergency department with sudden onset of severe chest pain and shortness of breath, which of the following approaches best reflects the expected standard of care in managing potential emergency room errors related to triage, misdiagnosis, and delay in treatment? Option A. Assign a moderate triage priority and await the availability of a senior physician to conduct the initial assessment to ensure comprehensive evaluation. Option B. Focus on managing the patient's pain with analgesics and observe for a period to determine if symptoms resolve spontaneously before initiating further diagnostic tests. Option C. Prioritize patients with visible trauma or obvious acute distress over this patient, as their conditions may be more immediately life-threatening. Option D. Immediately initiate a full cardiac workup, including ECG, cardiac enzymes, and chest X-ray, while simultaneously assigning a high-priority triage status based on the reported symptoms. The correct answer is D. Immediately initiate a full cardiac workup, including ECG, cardiac enzymes, and chest X-ray, while simultaneously assigning a high-priority triage status based on the reported symptoms. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it involves a critical juncture where a patient's immediate well-being and long-term prognosis hinge on the accuracy and timeliness of the emergency department's response. Triage errors, misdiagnosis, and delays in treatment in an emergency setting can lead to severe patient harm, including permanent disability or death, and significant legal and ethical repercussions for the healthcare providers and institution. The pressure of high patient volume, limited resources, and the inherent uncertainty of emergency medicine contribute to the complexity of these situations. The correct approach involves a thorough and systematic evaluation of the patient's condition, prioritizing immediate life-saving interventions, and ensuring clear communication among the healthcare team. This aligns with the fundamental ethical principles of beneficence, acting in the patient's best interest, and non-maleficence, avoiding harm, as well as professional standards of care that mandate prompt and accurate assessment and treatment. Regulatory frameworks governing medical practice emphasize the duty of care owed to patients, requiring healthcare professionals to act with the skill and diligence expected of a reasonably prudent practitioner in similar circumstances. This includes adhering to established triage protocols, conducting comprehensive diagnostic workups, and initiating appropriate treatment without undue delay. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on resource allocation, without adequately assessing the patient's acuity, would fail to uphold the principle of beneficence and could lead to a delay in critical care, violating the duty of care. Similarly, an approach that relies on assumptions or incomplete information, leading to a misdiagnosis, directly contravenes the principle of non-maleficence and professional standards requiring diligent diagnostic efforts. A failure to document the assessment and treatment plan thoroughly would not only hinder continuity of care, but also create a significant legal vulnerability, as it undermines the ability to demonstrate adherence to the standard of care. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a structured approach. First, rapidly assess the patient's vital signs and chief complaint to determine immediate life threats. Second, gather a focused history and perform a relevant physical examination. Third, utilize diagnostic tools judiciously to confirm or rule out suspected conditions. Fourth, initiate appropriate interventions based on the assessment and diagnostic findings. And fifth, ensure clear and concise communication with the patient, their family, and other members of the healthcare team, documenting all findings and actions meticulously. Question 18. Process analysis reveals that a physician has diagnosed a patient with a highly contagious and reportable infectious disease. The patient, fearing social stigma and potential job loss, explicitly requests that the physician not report the condition to public health authorities and also asks that the physician not inform any close contacts. The physician is aware of the state's Medical Practice Act, which mandates reporting of such diseases, and the state's Patient Bill of Rights, which guarantees confidentiality but also outlines exceptions for public health protection. What is the most ethically and legally sound course of action for the physician? Option A. Report the disease to the public health department but withhold any information that could identify the patient or their contacts, thereby balancing confidentiality and reporting requirements. Option B. Immediately report the disease to the public health department and inform the patient's close contacts, prioritizing public health over patient confidentiality. Option C. Respect the patient's wishes for complete confidentiality and do not report the disease or inform close contacts, as patient autonomy is paramount. Option D. Attempt to persuade the patient to voluntarily report the disease and inform their contacts, explaining the risks and legal obligations, and if unsuccessful, proceed with mandated reporting to public health authorities while respecting the scope of disclosure. Correct answer is B. Immediately report the disease to the public health department and inform the patient's close contacts, prioritizing public health over patient confidentiality. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a physician's duty to a patient and their legal reporting obligations. The physician must navigate the complexities of patient confidentiality, the specific requirements of the Medical Practice Act, and the patient's rights as outlined in the Patient Bill of Rights, all within the context of a potential public health risk. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing interests without compromising patient care or violating legal mandates. The correct approach involves a multi-step process that prioritizes patient well-being while adhering to legal reporting requirements. This approach begins with a direct and empathetic conversation with the patient, explaining the nature of the condition, its potential transmissibility, and the legal obligation to report. The physician should offer support and resources to the patient, including information on treatment and how to inform close contacts. If the patient remains unwilling to report, the physician must then proceed with reporting to the appropriate public health authority as mandated by the Medical Practice Act, ensuring that only necessary information is disclosed. This upholds the physician's duty to protect public health, as often stipulated in state medical practice acts, while attempting to maintain patient trust and minimize harm. The Patient Bill of Rights, while emphasizing patient autonomy and confidentiality, typically includes provisions that allow for disclosure of information when required by law or to prevent harm to others. An incorrect approach would be to immediately report the condition without attempting to discuss it with the patient. This failure to engage the patient directly can erode trust, potentially leading the patient to seek care elsewhere or avoid future medical attention, thereby hindering public health efforts in the long run. It also disrespects the patient's right to be informed about their health and the decisions made regarding their care, as outlined in the Patient Bill of Rights. Another incorrect approach is to withhold reporting altogether due to patient pressure or a misinterpretation of patient confidentiality. While patient confidentiality is a cornerstone of medical ethics, it is not absolute. State medical practice acts and public health laws clearly define exceptions, particularly for communicable diseases that pose a risk to the community. Failing to report in such instances violates the physician's legal and ethical duty to protect the public and can have serious public health consequences. A third incorrect approach involves reporting the condition to unauthorized individuals or entities, or disclosing more information than is legally required. This constitutes a breach of patient confidentiality beyond the scope of the reporting mandate and can lead to legal repercussions and damage to the physician's reputation. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Identifying the ethical and legal obligations, including relevant sections of the Medical Practice Act and Patient Bill of Rights. 2. Assessing the potential harm to the patient and the public. 3. Prioritizing open communication with the patient, explaining the situation and legal requirements. 4. Exploring options for patient cooperation and support. 5. If necessary, proceeding with mandated reporting in a timely and appropriate manner, disclosing only the minimum necessary information. 6. Documenting all communications and actions taken. Question 19. Performance analysis shows a consistent pattern of minor medication errors occurring on a specific hospital ward, with the most recent incident involving a patient receiving an incorrect dosage due to a transcription error. The ward manager, upon learning of this latest event, is considering how to respond. Which of the following actions best aligns with established principles of medical professional liability risk management and quality improvement? Option A. Immediately initiate disciplinary proceedings against the nurse who transcribed the medication order, as this is the third medication error attributed to the ward in the past month. Option B. Classify the incident as a minor deviation and instruct the nursing staff to be more careful in the future, without further investigation, as the patient was not harmed. Option C. Conduct a thorough root cause analysis of the incident, involving relevant staff, and focusing on identifying system-level factors that contributed to the transcription error, such as workflow, communication protocols, and electronic health record usability. Option D. Advise the involved nurse to refrain from reporting future medication errors to avoid further administrative scrutiny on the ward. The correct answer is A. Immediately initiate disciplinary proceedings against the nurse who transcribed the medication order, as this is the third medication error attributed to the ward in the past month. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need to address a patient safety incident with the long-term imperative of systemic quality improvement. The pressure to quickly assign blame can overshadow the opportunity for learning and preventing future harm. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the response is both compassionate towards those involved and effective in improving patient care. The correct approach involves a structured root cause analysis, RCA, that focuses on identifying system vulnerabilities rather than individual blame. This aligns with the principles of a just culture, which encourages reporting of errors and near misses without fear of retribution, thereby fostering an environment conducive to learning and improvement. Regulatory frameworks for medical professional liability often emphasize the importance of quality assurance and patient safety initiatives, which are directly supported by robust incident reporting and RCA processes. The goal is to understand the contributing factors that led to the adverse event and implement sustainable solutions to prevent recurrence. An approach that immediately focuses on disciplinary action against the involved clinician fails to acknowledge the systemic factors that may have contributed to the incident. This can create a culture of fear, discouraging future reporting, and hindering the identification of broader organizational issues. Such an approach may also violate ethical obligations to support healthcare professionals, and may not align with regulatory requirements that mandate a focus on quality improvement and patient safety systems. An approach that dismisses the incident as a minor deviation without further investigation overlooks the potential for learning from even seemingly small events. Near misses and minor incidents can often highlight latent system weaknesses that, if unaddressed, could lead to more serious adverse events in the future. Regulatory bodies typically expect healthcare organizations to have proactive systems for identifying and mitigating risks, which includes thoroughly investigating all reported incidents, regardless of their perceived severity. An approach that delays or avoids reporting the incident due to concerns about administrative burden or potential negative repercussions undermines the core principles of patient safety and quality improvement. Transparency and timely reporting are crucial for effective risk management and for meeting regulatory obligations. Failure to report can prevent timely intervention, hinder learning, and potentially lead to continued or repeated harm. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a systematic and non-punitive approach to incident management. This involves 1. Ensuring immediate patient safety, 2. Encouraging and facilitating prompt reporting of all incidents and near misses, 3. Initiating a formal root cause analysis to identify underlying system issues, 4. Implementing evidence-based recommendations for improvement, 5. Communicating findings and changes to relevant stakeholders, 6. Continuously monitoring the effectiveness of implemented changes. This framework ensures that patient safety is paramount while fostering a culture of continuous learning and improvement, in line with professional ethics and regulatory expectations. Question 20. Implementation of a comprehensive patient safety initiative following a near-miss event involving medication administration. What is the most appropriate initial step for the healthcare team to take to prevent future occurrences? Option A. Focus on identifying the individual staff member responsible and implement disciplinary measures to deter future errors. Option B. Conduct a multidisciplinary root cause analysis to identify systemic factors contributing to the near miss and develop evidence-based recommendations for improvement. Option C. Conduct a brief team debriefing to acknowledge the incident but defer any formal investigation or action until a later date. Option D. Immediately implement a new medication administration protocol without further investigation, assuming the existing protocol was inadequate. The correct answer is B. Conduct a multidisciplinary root cause analysis to identify systemic factors contributing to the near miss and develop evidence-based recommendations for improvement. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing immediate patient care needs with the systematic implementation of patient safety initiatives. The pressure to address a critical incident can lead to reactive measures rather than a proactive, systemic approach to error prevention. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the response not only addresses the immediate issue, but also contributes to a culture of safety and continuous improvement, aligning with regulatory expectations for healthcare providers. The correct approach involves a structured, multidisciplinary review of the incident, focusing on identifying systemic factors that contributed to the error. This aligns with the principles of patient safety mandated by regulatory bodies, which emphasize learning from errors rather than solely assigning blame. By conducting a root cause analysis and implementing evidence-based recommendations, healthcare professionals demonstrate a commitment to preventing future occurrences, thereby upholding their ethical and professional obligations to patient well-being and adhering to guidelines that promote a culture of safety. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on individual blame fails to acknowledge the complex interplay of factors that can lead to medical errors. This approach is ethically problematic as it can foster a climate of fear and discourage open reporting of errors, hindering learning and improvement. From a regulatory standpoint, it neglects the systemic requirements for error analysis and prevention, potentially leading to noncompliance with patient safety standards. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate disciplinary action without a thorough investigation overlooks the opportunity to understand the underlying causes of the error. This reactive measure can be perceived as punitive rather than corrective, failing to address systemic vulnerabilities. Ethically, it prioritizes retribution over learning and improvement, and regulatorily, it bypasses the essential steps of incident review and systemic analysis required to enhance patient safety. A further incorrect approach that involves a superficial review without concrete action plans fails to translate learning into tangible improvements. This approach is ineffective in preventing future errors and demonstrates a lack of commitment to patient safety. Ethically, it falls short of the duty to act in the best interest of patients by not implementing necessary changes, and regulatorily, It may not meet the standards for robust patient safety programs that require demonstrable improvements. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a framework that prioritizes a systematic and blameless review of incidents. This framework includes 1. Immediate patient care and stabilization. 2. Secure the scene and gather initial information without compromising patient care. 3. Initiate a formal incident review process involving relevant stakeholders. 4. Conduct a thorough root cause analysis to identify contributing factors. 5. Develop and implement evidence-based recommendations for system improvement. 6. Monitor the effectiveness of implemented changes. 7. Foster a culture of open communication and learning.